Oh, hi. You caught me watching men. Speaking of watching men, hey, I know. Let's talk about Watchmen. Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Watchmen. Well, when it comes to analysis and reviews of comic books, I doubt there's anything out there that's been looked at as much as Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And yet here I am, arrogant enough to think that I have something, however small, to add to the conversation. But let's be clear, across the 12 issues, which take a look at what it would be like if superheroes existed in something close to the real world, Watchmen presents a very layered narrative. A story with visual metaphors, unreliable narrators, back matter content for each issue, and numerous themes. In other words, it's an onion with layer upon layer, providing something fresh to, in this case, look at. I'm just going to mix my metaphors. So today, I'm going to share with you my trick to truly understanding Watchmen. Before I begin, I'd sincerely appreciate it if you could hit like and consider hitting subscribe if you want more comic book history and analysis, and I appreciate it. So let's get on with the show. So first of all, I'm going to strongly recommend that you read Watchmen if you haven't already. While it's set back in 1985, it's an alternate 1985 where Nixon is on his third presidential term and the US and Soviet Union are at the precipice of nuclear war. So, while that mirrors our world closely, especially at that time, it also provides just enough distance from actual history and is set so squarely in its era that it's a timeless story. The themes of the story continue to resonate. The dangers of fascism taking over, the fear of nuclear war, and the danger of being so sure of yourself that you pave your own road to hell, just like Rorschach. And all of that is brilliantly told to us in not unsubtle terms. But writer Alan Moore's biggest trick is that he has a way of making you pay attention elsewhere while Dave Gibbons explicitly shows us what is real. For instance, the world's scientists keep a doomsday clock to indicate how close they believe the world is to destroying ourselves through nuclear war. In fact, the clock is on the cover of each issue as it ticks closer to midnight. But let's look at that clock. What else does it look like? Well, it looks to me like the letter V. And who ultimately does blow up all of New York City successfully? The villain of the piece, Ozymandias, otherwise known as Adrian Veidt. The V is right there, warning us, the reader, who is the actual threat. And that's ultimately going to be my argument for understanding Watchmen. Appreciate it for the action mystery that's at hand. Dig deeper to understand the character arcs and commentary on society. But ultimately, this book gives you everything that you need to understand it if you slow down and just trust your own eyes. Every time something is going wrong for the heroes, you can find a reference to Adrian Veidt in the background. Comedian has been thrown out of his apartment window? Well, there's a transportation truck beside the body with a pyramid logo, which is part of Ozymandias' businesses. Dr. Manhattan's girlfriend has cancer. The next panel has a massive ad for his perfume with his company name. To truly understand Watchmen, look close and believe what you see, not what characters say. Because Watchmen is full of unreliable narrators. Watchmen ends with Rorschach dead, but he sent his journal, which outlines all of Veidt's secret plans, to a newspaper that Rorschach follows, and we, the reader, see in issue 8 is a tabloid that most readers probably don't take seriously. But what's important to Rorschach is that he takes it seriously. If his information that he sends to this newspaper gets out to the public, it could very well undo the massive stunt that Ozymandias has pulled off, wherein He kills everyone in New York City and frames it as a failed attack by alien invaders. Veidt's goal is to sacrifice millions to unite billions. But Rorschach only sees the world in black and white, with no grays. To him, a lie is a lie, and there is no true good that can be built upon it. The ends will never justify the means. And who ends up with the choice on whether to publish these journals? Well, Rorschach has mailed them to a right-wing crackpot newspaper, and the editor gives the task of filling up some editorial space with whatever their readers have mailed in that interests his editorial assistant. And what is the assistant's name? Seymour. Because by reading Rorschach's journal, he will see more than the rest of the world. And so will we. In fact, we the readers have seen even more than Seymour, because if we read Watchmen closely, we can see that Rorschach has revised and changed his journal. Let's back up, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Issue 1 begins with Rorschach investigating the murder of his fellow superhero, the Comedian. During this, we get to hear Rorschach's thoughts from the journal that he's keeping on his investigations. The comic begins with his journal reading, "Dog carcass in alley this morning. Tire tread on burst stomach." It's gross and dark, and it shows us how Rorschach sees the world. But what does his journal say when Seymour reads it in issue 10? "Dead dog in alley this morning." It says dead dog, not dog carcass, like we'd read in issue 1. And this tracks. Rorschach is framed for a crime and arrested by the police in issue 5. The back matter of issue 6 is a police report that says they've confiscated his journal and found it borderline illegible. At some point, before the heroes confront Ozymandias, Rorschach revised his journal and sent it to the new frontiersman. This discrepancy tells us two things. One, Rorschach literally dumbed down his journal for publication. He got rid of the word carcass. But second, it means that we don't actually know specifically what he wrote. He may have just slightly reworded things, but maybe it's more, and we'll never know for sure. Reading the back matter of each issue is very important because they are comprised of various objective materials. Printed newspaper articles, police reports, the first chapters of the original Golden Age Night Owl's biography. I don't mean that we can always take this literally, but it comes from an outside source than one of the main characters' points of view. Those back matter pieces are important because the characters in Watchmen are unreliable narrators. I just showed you that we can't be sure what's in Rorschach's final journal. The final issues of Watchmen show us that Ozymandias can't be trusted, but if we read the pirate comics within Watchmen that the kid by the news vendor reads, it foreshadows everything. In a world where there are real superheroes, pirate comics become popular, according to an article analyzing the comics of the 1950s that makes up the back matter of issue 5. The comic that we see, Tales of the Black Freighter, features a seaman who is stranded on a deserted island, and his only desire is to get home to his wife and child. Noble, pure. But he loses his mind on this mission. He uses the corpses of his fellow shipmates to erect a morbid little boat. He battles sharks and his own sanity, and he loses the latter. That foreshadows Ozymandias' goal of saving the world, but losing his direction. He builds his plan on the bodies of New York citizens. In both stories, the main character engages in monstrous acts that they justify by the fear of what could happen. The unreliable narrator isn't just a method that allows us to slowly uncover a mystery or dig deeper into a character. Instead, it's a warning against being too in love with nostalgia, something that can definitely be a problem for a lot of us that enjoy comics. Nostalgia is marketed as a commodity. For instance, Ozymandias is turning the crime busters into action figures as part of his business. But in the story, nostalgic longing leads to moral blindness. On a small scale, this would include the original Silk Spectre, Sally, being amused at the old pornographic comics that were made about her in her prime. She also keeps it a secret from her daughter that the comedian is her biological father because he was a violent bigot who once attempted to rape Sally. But she also had genuine affection for him despite his transgression. She lets her nostalgia for her celebrity days cloud her judgment. Nowhere is this dangerous nostalgia more clear than in the original Night Owl, Hollis Mason's biography. What he says in the pages of his book and what we see in the panels drawn by Dave Gibbons do not match. It means that in a book where each issue varies up our viewpoint character, we cannot fully trust any of them to be telling us the objective truth. We have to piece it together from everybody's different accounts. For example, at the end of chapter 1, Hollis's book describes his superhero group, the Minutemen, as optimistic and idealistic. Hollis Mason calls his fellow superheroes people trying to do good, but Hollis also writes that Silhouette was kicked off the team for being gay, which seems contradictory. Hollis's book talks about Sally's sexual assault as something she was persuaded not to press charges on so as not to negatively affect the Minutemen team. It's an extremely brief and sanitized version. Mason calls Comedian a disgrace to their profession. But Comedian was much worse than that. We see him committing wartime crimes and murdering a pregnant woman. Mason's biography romanticizes the past and downplays not just its violence and hypocrisy, but its stupidity. Mason describes Dollar Bill as dying with nobility, but Dollar Bill died in a stupid workplace accident when his corporate-sponsored costume and cape got caught in a revolving door. And in the same breath, Mason speculates about Hooded Justice's identity while admitting no one ever really knew who he was. Hollis is pretending to be an authority when he knows nothing. At the end of the day, the words are very important, but so are the images in this comic. It's all very deliberate and loaded with visual symbolism. Will Ozymandias's manufactured peace last? I tend to doubt it. Even if we don't know what is in Rorschach's journals, we can guess. An early issue shows Laurie, the second Silk Spectre, entranced with a castle in a snow globe as a child, but it drops and shatters. In the climax of Watchmen, Ozymandias celebrates his victory, and in the background, the TVs showing the news include a castle in the snow. I think that that was probably Dave Gibbons, and I think that it is foreshadowing that Ozymandias's peace will also shatter. I sincerely believe that it is a reminder of what we've seen and to trust our eyes. Now, with all that said, I would like to also say, take my examples with a grain of salt. That's what I have gotten out of reading the book, and it feels right to me, but that doesn't make it a fact. Watchmen is absolutely layered with meaning, but sometimes we, the reader, can add that meaning when it isn't there. That doesn't make it wrong. I'm just saying that there are things I could be seeing that are not actually the intent of Moore or Gibbons. This actually happened once before. In 1999, James Gifford wrote a great paper called Occulted Watchmen, and in it, he observed that during a date with Laurie and Dan, an older gay couple is prominently framed in the foreground. Using their age, their build, the composition of the scene, and the fact that their ties look like superhero domino masks, Gifford theorized that this was the Golden Age superheroes Hooded Justice and Captain Metropolis. The back matter of Watchmen only gives us Hollis Mason's guess that Hooded Justice was circus strongman Ralph Muller, and a news article that Muller was found dead around the time Hooded Justice stopped being a superhero. But that's not definitive. Dave Gibbons responded that that wasn't our intention, but it's such an interesting and plausible theory that I'm reluctant to deny it. In other words, We can find metaphors, symbolism, and meaning where it isn't intended. That doesn't make it wrong, but it also doesn't mean that we've cracked its secrets every time. Nevertheless, I think Watchmen has so many hidden backstories for its characters and contradictions in what they say and what we see that it is a story ripe for reading and rereading. Sometimes what we find is fairly obvious, like how Gibbons structures issue 5's panels and pages to mirror itself, which reinforces the story. And sometimes it's much more subtle, like my theory that the Doomsday Clock is spelling the letter V, like in the name Veet. I am curious, what is your favorite fan theory or headcanon about Watchmen? It truly is the comic that I have reread the most times, and I feel like I find something new each time. But I'm curious what you've found as well. Thank you so much for watching this brief analysis of Watchmen. I appreciate it. I'll see you very soon with more content. If you want to support me on Patreon, I also do a dedicated episode, an exclusive episode for my patrons there each month. It's a little bit of a lighter lift editorially, but it's always my opinion on a comic book, and whenever possible, I give those Patreon subscribers the opportunity to even vote on what I'm going to talk about. So just something a little extra. Thank you so much. I will see you very soon. Until I see you next time, just remember, keep reading comics. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching during these credits. Thank you to my lovely supporters on Patreon and on YouTube. You all make this possible. I've said it before. I will say it a million more times. I am so grateful for the support I get from you. Thank you everybody that's watching and hitting like and leaving a comment down below. That all helps with what's called the algorithm, but I don't need to talk about that. I had a really fun time digging into Watchmen. Maybe some of this stuff is things that you've thought of before. That's possible. I don't think that any comic has been written about as much as Watchmen, but it's rife for that analysis. You know, this wasn't meant to be just a recap of what it is, or to talk about stuff that people have talked about a million times. I mean, we know that Alan Moore was going to tell this story with the Charlton superheroes that DC had recently purchased, and DC was like, no, we don't necessarily want to treat our new product that we just bought this way. Why don't you just create analogs for each of them? So, you know, the Comedian is Peacemaker, Rorschach is The Question, and so on. But we kind of know that, I think, if you've read comics a little bit. I hope that this isn't your very first comic book analysis video that you've watched, but if it is, I'm very curious if it's got you curious to read Watchmen. What comic out there have you reread the most times that you think just warrants extra analysis? I'd be curious to hear about that. Thanks everybody. Appreciate your support. I'll see you very soon. Bye.